I want to thank everybody, one, for being here because it means you actually give a shit about learning and giving back. Two, I want to thank every single person who's working here because they care so much they made a venue for you to do that and gave us a safe space to do so. Three, all of the people, including the hotel, have to put up with our crap. Please just give them the same level of empathy and love that they give back. Like, I really don't think that we need a whole lot of rules other than, like, just be really nice because this is awesome that we get to learn a ton of shit from people. And, like, everyone around here has something to teach each other. So with that, I'm Chris. That's me in various formats. I worked at different companies. Whatever, none of that shit really matters.
I'm the other Chris. Army stuff, green stuff, red, now blue, purple stuff, or whatever the flavor color of the week.
Chrome.
So chrome. Chrome's the new hotness.
All right. So our disclaimers before this is that, yes, there are trigger warnings. I might not say something the way that you like it. I might mess up and say fuck. God damn it. But at the end of the day, like, I feel like a lot of stuff has been going backwards. When John and them talked this morning and said something about the code of conduct and like how it's good and it's pushing us forward, it's doing these things, I have a different opinion. I feel like if you need to read a code of conduct every time you go to a conference, you're an asshole and you don't know how to behave yourself. So like, read one once, and if that speaks to you and you're like, ooh, that's the stuff I can't do, don't go out. Like, don't fucking leave. Please don't come to our conferences. I mean, like, I don't care. Just don't. You suck. Like, figure shit out in your life and then come back. Again, like, I think there's lots of problems that exist. I will be the first one to say I bitch about a ton of them, but I'm also trying to hold my feet to the fire of like, well, how am I gonna fix it instead of bitch about it? I know that probably the stuff that we're gonna talk about, every person in this room may have an opinion on, may think it sucks or doesn't suck, may have the ability to fix it, or may have the ability or has already done shit that's way cooler. Like, that should not be the bar to entry. Like, it should be like, hey, I've done this is really cool, or hey, that really sucks, or hey, this is really awesome, but like, I want all of that feedback, and if you guys can do things that are better or cooler, please don't just do it on your own, like, come help us. Because as a team, we're gonna do this stuff a lot better, a lot quicker, and we're gonna be able to make some progress. So, that's my early disclaimer. Gates and I have worked in the industry forever. We made this thing, anybody see that? There's a lot of other people in the room who contributed to it, right? It was good. We took a crack at trying to make some standardization because there wasn't good taxonomy. We do pen testing. I still love that one. Right?
I still love it.
Yeah. I suck. Oh man, maybe I should be in pre-sales.
Yep.
Code review, app analysis. You know, we've done a bunch of incident response. Risk assessments, really, obviously. Physical security is something that we've also taken, you know, a liking to try and figure out, you know, what's the mixed discipline that we need to do to try and get into all of these things and make the biggest impact we can make. And then finally, we got known for doing a lot of red teaming. Because that's always super successful. Look at how bad that day sucked.
Just out.
Cold, good night. You want some water, bro? Yeah, it just hurts. Okay, so that's presentation stuff. A little while ago, we started to try and tackle, like, what are problems? And more, I think, between you and I, like, what problems have we caused? Or what problems existed around us versus just going, we can do it better than them, like try and figure out the root of where the problems existed. And I think this says it pretty well.
Yeah, I found the one tweet that summed up everything I was thinking as we were preparing for this slide. Like, that's it. Like, how many times did we roll in and have to do a red team and nobody was there to even look, right? So, and the guy got no love on that. That's both my like and retweet.
So I think what it led us to is that, we don't know how to simulate. Like we don't have, like, even though our function really should be like the flight simulator for the defense as an offensive team, we have no idea how simulation works. Like our flight simulators, if we were pilots, would just be like, hey, get into this tin can, kick it down a hill, and be like, you crashed. Like that's it. That's like that's all we have. They're like, how did I crash? Be like, get in the can again. Boom, you crashed, ha! And it just keeps fucking going over and over like that. And so now we're gonna try and take a stab at how do we actually do it successfully.
Yeah, I would add that I thought I was doing a good job as a simulator, as a red teamer, until I started doing blue-purple team. And I realized how horrible of a job I was actually doing when I was on the receiving end of pen tests and things. So.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, for 20 years, I thought I was doing okay until I went and I sat inside of a company for 6 months building an internal team, and I was like, wow, I suck. Like, I have completely destroyed parts of this industry en masse. Like, I am kind of accountable for that shit. So, some terms, right? People know these terms of what's going on. Like, I run a vuln scanner, I do pen testing stuff, or like, oh, hey, I went lateral and used CrackMap and got DA, or, hit the auto death star button.
I dig the purple team one because you get to charge twice.
Yeah, charging twice is cool.
2 engineers or more. It's great.
Yeah. Adversarial engineer is something that we've started to try and talk about, but that term's already getting screwed by the people who are just like, I'm a little bit better than a red teamer. So I'm going to just toss that up as that could be someone who simulates stuff and actually provides some metrics of those things, or it could just be like a really, really expensive pen tester. And then Pro Master, because why not make up some random new term?
Timestamp.
Yeah, timestamp, there's some other one. Network. Because, somebody's going to screw it up at some point, so we'll just keep making up bizarro terms to like push our pay rate up. This is something that speaks to me heavily now. Offense only wins you a game. And we're not trying to win games, we're trying to like stay alive forever. So we started focusing on like what do we do? What do we do with this offense capability that we have to go somewhere with it? Last year we took a good stab at it. I think, well, at least we thought at the time.
I thought so, because it was like, this is this new, sexy, sweet, shiny thing. I want to go play with it.
Yeah.
So anybody else, who started playing with the MITRE stuff after like last year? A couple people, right?
Awesome.
Yeah. And then we were like, hey, it makes sense to lay out what our tools do. Like when I did that exercise at work, it was amazing. I was like, oh, look at all these gaps, or look at all these things. We have like 6 things that do this one thing, and it was no tools that do the other really important thing.
Yes, so for any of you that don't know, there's this MITRE attack thing that exists out there, right? It's some common taxonomy and digest.json of specific TTPs that exist in the wild as a way for you to not only take attacker activities that are chained and break them down into kind of digestible individual pieces, or to be able to use that as a taxonomy to describe things that are going on, right? So much like you have other descriptive languages, this is really, MITRE's kind of 2.0 approach of taking KPEC and making it not a steaming pile of dog shit. That's hard to function because it's just a giant Excel graph. Not saying that it's bad, but that was just a 1.0 way of looking at it. And I think we started to get the same thing out of using this in the beginning. We started off looking at these, going, cool, we can simulate each one of these particular TTPs and start to figure out whether we caught it, we didn't catch it, we kind of caught it, like shit was blown up in the middle, whatever. But it just started to turn into an eye chart, and we started to go, oh, well, we have this attacker capability, how come we don't have defender capabilities? So then we went through this and said, okay, across the entire attack lifecycle, where does my shit actually fit? Like, where do my firewalls do things in this attack lifecycle versus something else, versus my DLP stuff, versus the mystery 7 threat intelligence feeds that exist? Like, where does it go? But just going through this exercise alone, you can start to see like really big gaps. Once you compress all of this stuff and overlay it, you can see where the weaknesses are in the defense without ever touching the environment. You can see exactly where shit won't get caught and start to operationalize against it. You can say, oh, this only works on this OS, this only works in this one DMZ. Yeah, we've got this thing, but it's only in our PCI DMZ, and nobody cares about that because the database is not in the PCI DMZ by their requirements, so you don't have to go to this shit anyway. You just get in the inside. So we had some wins. We had some wins looking at this list last year. We could visualize things. We could make the sexy, cool heat map and say like, here's how well you're doing in one phase of the attack or the other. We built all sorts of really, really awesome awareness. Like people were like, oh, I finally understand what's going on with this defense thing because you showed me a graph that made it kind of make sense versus the like FireEye, I stopped 25,000 bads today. And you're like, how many? And it was like, I don't know, cupcakes. And you're just like, but you don't help me. Like as soon as you get to that question, I feel like it's the point where somebody goes, oh yeah, well, who made your god? And you're like, shit, chicken egg. Not helpful.
Yeah, and then everyone rallying around stuff. So like the stuff Casey's doing, and I mean, tons and tons of people are jumping on making defense interesting and how to relate it to attack stuff, which was like something that really didn't exist 2 years ago.
Yeah, it was
so it's
amazing. I think the big things that I wanted to focus on more though is like, where did we fail? Because we started off on this thing, I was super excited. Like I have to stand like this because I get a boner because I get to hang out with Gates more. And it just makes me really excited, but like I think some of that excitement fell on my face because like I went out, I was like, awesome, we're gonna implement this stuff. We had 3 clients that we were building internal and staffing internal red teams. And we came in to the opportunities saying, everybody else, all the E&Y, IBM, other people, and everybody else was like, yeah, we build red teams, and they didn't. They built pen testing teams. And I was like, we're not going to do that. We're not going to be a pen testing team. That isn't acceptable. That is not how we're going to be used in the organization. If you want a pen test team, build one. And we were like, I'm coming in with this thing. And we came up with this thing, and they found a ton of cool things, and then I got like smashed in the face and a bunch of others. And like one of the teams pulled away and just became a pen testing team. And I was like, oh, damn it. I had these high hopes and you just took my baby and make it a crackhead like before it got old.
Yeah, I'll add that, we gave that talk last year and I was super excited and I thought I could explain it well. And then I talked to some leadership at work and they even watched the talk and they're like, I still don't get it. Like, but we trust you, like you're smart, go do it. And I was like, well, I have a problem. My elevator pitch isn't good enough yet that I can clearly explain what it is we're trying to do here. It was cool metrics and defense. Yeah, I know that word. Do that. Yeah, better defense. Cool. You 2 thumbs up. Go. So that's just things like as we thought about this and we're thinking about the last year, like that really came to my mind as like a failure on me.
Yeah.
That I probably still can't explain it well enough.
We probably won't. So
Yeah.
if you guys understand it, you might understand it better than us to be able to.
If you can, come talk to me because I want to be able to
hit me up.
steal it.
I want to make it.
Yeah, and the second one too, like how to measure this stuff. Like I'm still running into how do we measure how do you measure an effective attack? How do you put a number on that? Mm-hmm. How do you put a number on a response? Because we tend to think of them as more binary than a range of numbers.
Right. So in it, we also figured out that it's really, really manually intensive. Like iterating all of these things, like the stuff that Casey's doing with the atomic attack stuff, it's amazing. But doing all of these things at scale means either a whole lot of copy and pasting for this project, or you trying to do that in all of these places all at the same time, and it's tons and tons and tons of human hours against it, with really, really high amounts of decay and failure that exist inside of it that are uncontrolled.
Yeah, I mean, last year I showed that I could generate the events I wanted with a bat file, but then I was like, well, how am I going to do that 3 times a day, every day, forever? Because I don't want to do that.
Right. We also found that Excel is horrible, right? Like, and I think everybody else has figured that out for a very long time, but since I'm not smart and I have to rely on Gates to build things, I just started with Excel. because I'm dumb. And I'm like, I can make pretty colors in this. Watch, right-click color. But what we're able to do is communicate some really interesting data through that. You know, you can figure out what techniques were detectable, not detectable, how much money we were spending on one product versus another product, what the maturity was. We're finding out really, really interesting things like, hey, you just spent $45 million to stop this APT thing, but it doesn't stop any of the APT stuff, and it only gives you like an extra 5% of coverage on the really easy shit. That's a huge thing to communicate up the chain. They're just like, whoa, I got totally blown by the salesperson. You're like, yeah, they did, they got you. You know, but now you know, now I can prove it to you. But the problem with that is this data, because it's so manual and because it's so labor intensive, and it has to be done all over the place and all the time, and controls change all the time, it decays super fast. So like by the time I make this spreadsheet and I make this chart and I hit like copy, paste, save it to my PowerPoint presentation so I can give it to the executives, it's already wrong. It's literally already wrong at that moment, like goodbye, it's fucking over.
Yeah, I mean, every firmware update, every update on any tool and that made one of those charts, I don't know what it looks like the next day. What'd they take away? What'd they add, right?
Right, it completely goes away. And I think, you know, the community even told us, right, like, hey, this is a great idea, but do you have it in a non-shitty format?
Nope, still don't.
So instead of being sad by it, we kind of took it as like an opportunity to fail and figure out how could we come here. When John asked us at BrewCon to talk, how can we come here and improve on the things that we were doing? Not just make more or faster of what we were doing, to like completely change the things that we were doing. So we're like, okay, what do we tackle inside of this? Because there's a lot of broken shit, right? All right, well, let's tackle first scalability, because it's important. Right? Scalability is super important. Because our environments scale really, really hard, really, really fast, and if we don't scale, every piece of data that we give back is totally irrelevant. Right? People get that? And we got to tackle measurement. Something that our industry might be the worst industry in the world at, is measuring things. Like, we might actually be the worst. I don't really know any other industry that doesn't measure things as much as us. The fact that they have measurements and don't have measurements, and we just have like, pie chart, bad. And you're like, what does any of that mean? You're like, I don't know. Risk, ALE versus ARO versus, and you're like, hold on. Do I have to call Anonymous and ask them how many times I'm gonna get hacked this year? Like, none of those metrics make any sense. They're not real, right? They're not static data that you can make interpretations off of. They're already pre-interpreted. So, can you guys think of, in our industry, in being in security, any of the tools and processes and procedures, firewalls that exist out there, you know, IDS, whatever magic laugh bullshit, authentication thing, whatever, do we measure those tools' effectiveness? Like, what do they do? How well are they working? Like, example, do we know that today I ran something on this box, it got a antivirus update, and tomorrow, the same shit I ran yesterday will or won't run? Do we even know what the update was, or like what it now fixes versus takes away? Do we know any of that? It's kind of bothersome to me that we have no visibility into how well any of our stuff performs, other than just like, blocked more bad guys today, like pew pew map isn't saturated. So we're like, all right, how do we figure out, yeah.
Sorry, just as a question, I guess as a response to that.
Please.
Isn't it harder, you know, for us, it's things that don't happen, right? I mean, you know, we're measured, and how do we measure ourselves against what doesn't happen, right? I mean, we're like insurance.
Correct. If I was Tara, I'd throw money at you. So, yeah.
Yeah, all right.
Yes!
Free money.
Get money. What's up?
I'll get it back when we make the poker table.
Ooh, that's good. I like that. That's on camera.
Since we got before, I was going to say we don't measure because we don't know what to measure.
Yes! You're
Yay!
also correct.
Thank
Which
you.
is why we have decided to just coin a term. We sat in Gates' kitchen and we looked up a whole bunch of words and said, what the hell are we actually talking about? And I started to get on this crazy tangent of different types of telemetry. Anyone know what talent is? in the signal intelligence world and OSINT intelligence world, right? Right. Telent is our ability to communicate the firepower of certain munitions from different countries and be able to measure their firepower capacity to see if they're breaking laws so that we can go tell mom and dad that, like, ooh, they got more big bombs, right? It also is a complete determined way to say we need to have feedback. We need to have an automated process that actually measures and collects data that's remote of us. So exactly what you're talking about, we don't know what we don't know, and we need to be able to get data to figure that out, right? And right now, the biggest problem is we don't have any of that data from any of our stuff. Like, none of our stuff is built to say, I'm also supposed to give you the successful logins. You know, like, it's way hard. It's really, really, really hard to try and say, I can get all of the data about what you're doing, even when you don't realize you're doing it. Like, what's the negative space? Yeah?
Well, it's just, and just not to, I'm not trying to argue with you, right? But I think what that
We'll just show you how.
cool,
I
but
can't wait to show you.
we don't have the space to keep it. We don't have the people to monitor it.
Don't believe me.
Okay.
So, this year, we have tried to tackle your problem, right? The problem is that if I run the net commands, I know whether the net commands should be caught. I did my defensive analysis to say these net commands should be caught across these platforms and have artifacts in these ways. I now have a backdrop to measure what should I have caught, right? And if I do that across the commonality of the scale, the reason that we're using attack as the baseline for that is because it's a fairly comprehensive list of all of these different things that happen in an attack lifecycle that you should or shouldn't be seeing. And depending on your instrumentation on the inside, you'll see it or won't see it based on the level of coverage that you have. So instead of trying to run one bat file one time and going, oh yeah, you know, it saw it today, and then AV updates and it changes, and you're like, don't know, ran it once, I was pretty much set and forget. Yeah. Now we want to move to a model where we can see, are you catching the things that you should catch every time, all the time? Make sense? Okay.
Sorry, you have to listen to me now for a bit. Yeah, I think you can do the next one. The idea is I went to work and was like, hey, we had these goals. I want to actually try to implement them. So we had a problem with, the first thing we did is I did this in Excel hell was I took all the rules we had and I mapped them to all the MITRE things, which was super valuable, but was really only valuable for me because I was the only one that actually looked at the spreadsheet. But what we got out of that was the ability to, once we refactored them, to say, start to make that heat map. Because making that heat map is really manual, it's hard,
It's really hard.
It's a pain in the ass. And so now we can programmatically like run a Python script and it says, okay, all the rules are tagged with techniques and phases, and we can spit out, you know, how many we have coverage for. And there's another option in that tool that will show me how many have 0, right? So that's important. That can drive what rules need to be written. So at work, all of our detection rules were kind of black magic for people. They were basically in a CSV file that me and another guy could change, and nobody knew how they worked. So we had this big thing at the beginning of this last half where we refactored all of them in YAML because we wanted everyone to be able to contribute to them. We wanted them to be version controlled, so if somebody pushed a bad one, we could just easily roll it back and see who did it.
I have a quick question. Any of you do defense? Okay.
All right, cool.
How many of you who do defense know what your rules actually do? That was not even close.
Rob gets to cheat because he works with me. So there's like 3 people out of the whole crowd.
Right. So, I mean, think about that, right? Like, we have a whole bunch of stuff, and we kind of don't really know what it does all the time. And the effort that they're talking about going through now is starting from a standpoint where you only know what's going on.
Yes. If you go back to rules set real quick. So what was important there is like details about what the rule get added to the description and the links, the MITRE attack phases and techniques get added, and then the rule itself. So in this case, this is a carbon black rule, and it's looking for the server certificate validation callback inside of PowerShell, right? So we actually started to run into 2 big problems. One, pipelines. So when I was a red teamer, I had no idea how logs got anywhere. Like they were just on something and magically ended up way over here. And I was like, why don't you see that shit? Like, why didn't it get there? When I got really smacked in the face when I moved to Uber because I was doing pure blue team and we were building these pipelines. And they're really madly complicated. Does anybody have like a nice, easy logging infrastructure? No, right? It looks like this, right? This isn't quite as bad as what we have, but it's pretty bad. And like every spot along that path is where something can stop forwarding logs, right? A lot of our logs have multiple hops. So the need arose to do end-to-end testing of our pipeline. So do an event on an endpoint, and then does it make it actually to the SIM? So a lot of times it doesn't, and so if that means the pipeline is down, where is it down? Sometimes we had people that were on call that were just happy as hell that there were no alerts coming in and didn't bother to mention that, hey, it's been like 2 days and nothing happened, and that's kind of abnormal. So we wanted to do, and then get metrics, right? And so along with that, we also kind of at the bottom realized that a lot of these rules didn't work. So I would go to do some sort of like adversarial SIM piece. I'm like, I'm gonna do this, and I'd wait, and it wouldn't show up. And I was like, okay, it hurts. I'm like, and a lot of these rules had my name on them.
This is to your point of like how do I know what I don't know? And then the problem that we started to get once we knew what we were supposed to know is like, did the information come in? Is it me not knowing anymore, or is it just something's broken, right? Because I knew the net command ran, and all of a sudden today, this AV didn't pick it up where it did, or it did pick it up, and then it didn't pick it up the next day. And then I go, oh man, AV's broken. The DAT file destroyed everything in our environment. And then we're like, oh no, just kidding. The log forwarder's down. Yeah, and that happens. So like, not only knowing what you know, like the environment outside of that sometimes completely ruins your faith.
Right. Yeah. So So to summarize the two problems we had, we needed a full end-to-end testing for pipelines, and then unit testings per rule, because some of them just didn't work. And so I built this system. It's called Cylon internally. It takes all those YAML files, which is like one file per rule. It hits the engine. The engine like posts to Slack that, hey, I'm beginning. Here's all the rules I'm running. If you looked at the other slide, there was we created a celery worker, a task queue, because we quickly found out that as soon as one thing failed, everything else behind it failed. So we needed to build something that would allow you to queue up hundreds of actions and keep going. So the vagrant worker goes and executes the commands, whatever commands you want on the respective vagrants. It also popped into a carbon black worker, which would start querying carbon black for the results. And then also logged all that to a database so we could use it later. And then on the other side, we use Phantom Cyber as our SIM. Obviously the difficult part is I don't know when the event came in, so I had to rely on Phantom to tell me. So when the event came in, Phantom works on like playbooks to enrich alerts and close things out. And so this playbook will run, post to Slack to let me know that the loop got completed, and then post back to the database. There's also a few other things that are missing in the graph, but really there's one around timeouts. So like if the carbon black piece timed out or the Phantom piece timed out, it lets me know that, hey, I didn't get something, which is super important because if it didn't make it to carbon black, I know there's a problem with the rule most likely. And if it didn't make it to Phantom, then I know it's a pipeline issue, which is hugely valuable.
And thinking about scalability of that, like now running the net commands can be anywhere that there's a vagrant, like anywhere.
Right.
All the places.
Yeah, AWS, ESX, locally.
Yeah, instead of logging into 20 different platforms to change the same thing, like you now have the ability to push it and run it every time, all the time. And be able to have automation without going, hey, I ran the thing, which is the part that we started to have, right? Which is, hey, I ran the thing. I have to pick up a phone, call the defense guys, and go, hey, we ran the thing. And then they have to search their bunch of crap and go, we did or didn't see the thing, or it's now part of a ticket or not part of a ticket. Like that process takes so much time.
Yeah, it doesn't scale well at all. So how the magic happens is there's an exec string and an OS string, and the OS string tells you which vagrant to send it to, and the exec string is, just like if you looked at Casey's atomic testing stuff, it just runs that command on the vagrant, right? Yeah. You could. They run on vagrants that are instrumented, so we have all our host-based instrumentation on there, and then you could. The ones we use for Cylon, do go through our network stack too. So if they were talking out to the internet and any of the network-based stuff, that would work. I haven't built the C2 piece yet, but it's just a plugin, right? It's just a matter of saying, okay, upload this binary and execute it, and then worry about the traffic and all that, all the exfil stuff too. Like, it's totally doable. I just didn't build it yet. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And so here's kind of what it looks like, right? So here's one that says, hey, I want to run a rule or run something that shows me when command.exe is run from a non-standard path. So there's the exec string. There's it showing up in Carbon Black, and there's the Slack hook that posts back into the channel that says, hey, I ran that, so I know that that whole thing worked. And now we can do that a couple hundred times per how many rules we have. And then all that data also works, so you can also use the timing data to say, hey, well, I have this time that things should take, and then when you can see we had a couple bad, or at least a bad day where all the logs just stopped, and this was a good way for us to like call up the infrastructure guys and say, hey, something's the matter. So you can start to build other metrics and start getting some of that telemetry based on that. When I ran it, did it show up here? Did it show up here? How long did it take? Something's getting backed up, right? So
Yeah, and the things that I like get all fuzzy about looking at it is that not only does my internal team that I have that's supposed to be pushing the organization forward get totally optimized to do new things, right? Like they can go and write a YAML file any day and train the machine to do stuff that they would have done and like kick that into automation land. But also there's tons of feedback of being able to now say, am I sure that the information that they're getting is correct? Because I think in the beginning, the biggest problem that I had with any of the data that we were generating is that everybody was getting really stoked that we were being able to do stuff like, oh, the exec would come to us and say, APT 295. And I'm like, yeah, Mandian. And they're like, who is that? And I'm like, it's Mandian pretending to be the Chinese. And then they're like, okay. And they're like, so what are they doing? And you're like, well, if you read the report, they discuss all the TTPs that are used. And they're like, okay, well, what does that mean to us? And then I go over to the Excel spreadsheet and I go, well, we've iterated all of these things in the attack path, except this thing, and then this one thing on Casey's Twitter that they used. And so hold on 1 second, we just have to iterate this real quick and I'll get you an answer. And then would come back with a probability of how long it would take to catch them, where we would catch them, at what phase of the attack we would catch them, and what our level of certainty was. That was awesome. My problem was when I looked at my Excel spreadsheet, it had decayed so much that I wasn't sure of my answer. Right? And that was really, really hard because I was giving them a better answer than anyone had ever given them. But I wasn't sure of my answer, and some of these things now we're able to automate it at a level where we can be sure or more sure of the answers that we're trying to give out. Yeah.
Define more sure.
Yeah, more sure.
But like
Just more.
yes,
Just
no,
more.
85%.
It's more maybe than less maybe.
Got it.
It's maybe above or below 50% of maybe.
Worth the weekend.
Yeah,
cook.
maybe-ish.
Okay.
Or versus like, yeah, probably maybe, like a beer or something. So, the other part that's hard about this is you might be able to do all of these defensive things, and you might be able to do the awesome offensive things, and the offense things are in categorically. They're in, the attack framework and pre-attack and in a bunch of other areas. So we have like a really good basis for what should be done there, and then a bunch of good walkthroughs of, like here's the thing that you should do to test this. And we have a lot of that. We really don't have a good place of that on the defense side because the defenders are playing the same game that we've played for a long time, which is like, this is my elite, super defense, awesome thing that I really don't want to give to anybody else because if I give it to anybody else, I don't have as much value in the environment. So it's hard. So it's really, really hard to go find external authority and sources on how do I even catch the shit that I'm running. Make sense?
you guys agree? Like, who has to write rules for stuff?
Maybe there is. Maybe there's like a special defender repo where you can just go there and like check out a whole bunch of rules and just be like,
Okay.
this is awesome.
Most people are shaking
Yes.
no, so that's good. Because
All right.
I would have felt bad if I had missed that.
I know, right? I'm like,
why did I do all this work?
Get in my slides. Where to get rules? This place only.
Yeah, if only someone had like a feed you could buy that would just do that.
Exactly. Right. All right. So inside of simulation.
Oh, that's me. I was showing Chris this cool thing I wrote, and he's like, oh, well, we could automate all the, like, you could do this. I'm like, cool, I have a couple hundred attacker actions, and I have a tool that will actually queue them up and run them. we can do adversarial simulation. So the tool's getting released soon. It's in the open source process at work. I started late on it because I didn't know how long it would take. But it's soon, I promise. We've been doing emails all week. Yeah, Rob can attest that it exists and works. And so here's kind of what it is. So piggybacking off parts of the Cylon engine, we've written some other YAML files, and what's probably interesting there is you have your purple actions, which are a list of actions that map to a MITRE phase and technique, and this can be as many as you want. So in this case, it's just doing a bunch of different PowerShell-y stuff that you may or may not have an event per, right? So a lot of times if you're doing simulation, you want to do a bunch of things that aren't necessarily alert-worthy. I want to CD into a folder. I want to DIR stuff. I want to look at things. I want to emulate how I behave on a box. So YAML files to do that. It's using the thing. So the top one is just running that so you get some output that it's working. This middle one is the celery output. So it shows that it put it on the stack and then it ran like I'm running here, and then like there's the output. So like it said, hey, the command I want to do is write host doing evil stuff here, and then the bottom one is that it actually worked and it echoed that out. So as many things as you can write, as many things as you want to run, you could add to these, and then they get executed on whichever vagrants you want.
So do you guys have a place where any of this would be useful? Like where things would help?
All right, cool. Because that was like 3 months of my life, so I'm glad that's useful to somebody. And so then the ideas for scenarios came up. So MITRE has a lot of the groups mapped out by the techniques that they use, mapped to their techniques. So in this case, this was an easy one or a great example that it had all the techniques they used and a lot of examples of what they were actually doing. So I want to do net start into this folder and local group administrator into this file and then upload that file later.
Yeah. So if somebody goes and they ask you, hey, does this adversarial group, what's our level of vulnerability to them or whatever else? Instead of saying like low, medium, high, or just like doing the old finger in the wind thing, you can actually tell them. Like you can tell them this is exactly what works and how.
All right, so this is just running. I took that page and made it into each of those got their own file. So scenarios run a list of those execution YAML files. And so there's one that's doing execution, command line interface, admin 338 things, and then system discovery that are mapped to admin 338, and then system discovery, system network configuration. So all basically everything in there got put into its own file for all the commands they listed, and they all get executed in order. And then I also built some really, really basic reporting. So if anyone wants to help or has suggestions on how to do it better, let me know. But what I thought would be interesting for our blue team was, hey, this is the time that it ran. Here's some information about the file, the actual action that ran, the phase and technique, and then which host it ran on. So they should be able to go through the sim and look at this, and I can kind of track their work because I know what time I did it.
I mean, so that's the money of like, what should I catch and how should I catch it and why should I catch it, right? That's where all of that starts. Now that's hopefully with the beginnings of this being able to expand way farther into the future of doing things automatically or giving all sorts of enriched feedback. But right now we're at a point where at least we can tell you what you should have catch, where you should have caught it, how you should have caught it, and like what the different techniques and stuff are. All right. There's a ton of other cool projects out there that are starting to look at this problem and starting to look at the problem from a perspective of how do I take the capabilities that I have, how do I take them and actually translate them into net positive improvement in defense instead of like get in the trash can, kick you down the hill over and over again. And they're awesome. Anybody seen, the atomic testing stuff?
I ported a few things over, and I'll do the rest now that this talk is over.
Yeah.
Get back to doing that stuff.
Yeah. Dumpster fire? Anyone?
Anybody seen
Just
this?
go search and do a bunch of horrible bad shit.
This is awesome. This can do the hey, I was looking at whatever, like Rob talked about emulating the insider thread of who's like, well, how do I use Mimikatz? And so you could script up, how do I use Mimikatz and download it and do everything else. You can now put those artifacts on a host for people to see and interact with.
Sorry, WebET3. Another full toolkit of being able to simulate bad stuff in a controlled manner, right? But the things that we're finding is that as these projects are coming out, talking back to our broken scale, scalability, and measurement, we need that mechanism to feed back a measurement into something or using some kind of language so that we can do stuff with the measurement, right? Because once we have that, that's going to get us one step closer towards like the Borg being able to heal itself, right? So we have to have some of these defensive telemetry pieces. We have to know those measurements and those things in order to associate it, in order to make suggestions, in order to get visualization reporting, and be able to feed that back into the machine to say fix yourself and where to fix yourself. One of the really cool projects, anybody play with Unfetter? Okay, Unfetter is...
No, not really.
Anybody ever hear CAPAC or CAPAC, the old MITRE framework? Hear of that? Right? It does like attack mapping, instrumentation stuff. Like, here's what an attack is, here's the chain of the attack, here's threat, adversarial group, and all that stuff. Unfetter is trying to take the 2.0 approach to it, right? They're trying to say, how do I get all of these things, make sure that the research projects that exist out there can auto-update me as a central repository of knowledge, right? And start mapping the different groups and then do assessments on where my gaps are. Make sense? It'll be really, really functional the more and more data it starts to get, and why we're trying to look at using that as a thing that can be some of the instrumentation telemetry understanding and start pushing some of this data towards it, so then you can start automatically mapping groups. Mapping attacker groups right now in this, way easier than a giant spreadsheet, right? You click a button, it will highlight the different pieces that it does. It'll highlight the different instrumentation pieces, it'll highlight the different TTPs, it'll show you where they are, how they exist, what they do.
Yeah, it pulls all this data from that MITRE page, so it's the same data from a couple slides back. And then now it shows up in a way that you can visually see very quickly of, threat group 339, whatever, does these different techniques inside of these phases. It's way easier than a spreadsheet and really way easier than looking at it on the MITRE page.
Yeah, and these are still disconnected, right? Like, you see how what we're trying to do on some of the instrumentation of running the thing, right, anywhere, being able to call our defensive tools and say, did you see the thing? And now we have that data, but it's not really going to anywhere that's using the data and consuming it to allow the environment to perform better. Now what we're talking about is trying to say, can we take that data, can we get all of the pieces of it, can we throw them out to some type of external authority and start to get reporting and measurement back on, like, what are we seeing, how did we see it, where did we see it, did the tools find it, did the tools not find it? I mean, imagine being able to say, today I ran a net command, my defense saw it, tomorrow I ran the net command, the defense didn't see it, and the next action of item against that is go fix yourself so that you can see this net command, and it goes, oh, this particular tool that was a piece of instrumentation that stopped it or found it or whatever else, when I got to that box, realized that it was down and restarted it automatically, ran the job again, and then said, cool, I caught it. How cool would that shit be? Like, I mean, and take that at much larger scales to like automatic rule writing for itself and things like that. But like, we're still in the infancy of trying to like birth an idea that our tools need to give us feedback in order for us to make better decisions, not say that they made the decision for us. So these are what assessments look like in Unfetter right now, right? Looking at, remember the crappy Excel spreadsheet that had a bunch of colors across? Now we have it visualized in an API that you can pull information from, you can push it away from, you can use it as a storage repository, being able to keep it up to date, right?
Yeah, and this works by just asking you questions and you saying, yes, I can see this, or no, I can't, right? So you fill this out the first time manually, but then you can do it programmatically after you do it the first time. So if an answer changed and a tool could do that, you could post to Unfetter to update your answers.
Yep. All right. Does that kind of make sense so far? I mean, I know it's a big bite because what we're talking about isn't a tool that is like we go and we fix this problem. Like we dipped our toe in the water and realized an entire industry exists around not having measurement of our own tools. And we're like, cool, let's try and build a tool and get measurement from that, and then see if that could infect other things to try and say, this is what you can get by measuring your tools. Does that kind of make sense? I mean, I know it's early and it's chunky, but the things that we're finding that are coming out of it are starting to be really, like, valuable to the point that it's changing my opinion of my own career.
Yes, I'll talk a little bit. So like ideas for plugins and things. So there's already a carbon black plugin that you could use to like make sure that the thing you ran is showing up somewhere. But probably more interesting that Chris and I talked about while we were out here is an Unfetter plugin to build that would actually pull that attacker data, pull that the T number that goes to a technique, and then build your attack automatically from that. All the data exists on Unfetter for every group. So totally possible to say, run that, pull the data from Unfetter, grab the ones that I need, and do the attack automatically. So that's probably like the next, some of the other things I'm going to tackle. And then just doing other things for C2. I wrote a tool that made malicious file attachments, just a Python file, but the idea is starting to string more and more of the full attack together. So, you know, with Terraform or Ansible or any of these other tools, you could spin up the C2 piece. So you can say, okay, I know I want to do a DNS exfil. Let's go ahead and spin that up in AWS, set that up, download the binary, push it to the Vagrant, and run it. Same thing for Office macros, or just even doing things in like AWS. So, you know, if you have AWS monitoring or people are supposed to do that, can I build up some AWS things that are vulnerable? Does that actually make it to the blue team in a timely manner?
Yep.
So,
So beyond our project that is probably vast to the point where everybody has an opinion or the ability to build plugins into it to start making it kind of limp and function, and start to develop and use that, how we can do auto-suggestioning. There's a ton of other stuff that we don't measure at all. There's so much that when we look at some of these teams that it's not about, hey, I got you, or hey, I didn't get you. It's about at what level did I or didn't I, and what's the feedback loop, and how do I suggest resolving it? And these are just some basics. I mean, just total coverage in your environment it's a massive project. If you were to just say, I need to know the total coverage in my environment, people will give you just answers that end in product names, and that's it. They won't tell you if it works or doesn't work. Yep.
Well, that was my point earlier.
Right.
I mean, it's like, you know, in my one tier, we literally have 10,000 servers. How do we sit there and get that coverage and get the data to a point? I mean, you know.
Exactly. Right? Those are things that we have to try and figure out. How do we pull those things together? We're taking a whack at saying you could do that from every vagrant, and from every vagrant you could start seeing in the instrumentation, so it's environmental, but does that mean it's on every host? It has the potential, it could be someday, but it's a place to go, right? That alone is not just a thought. I mean, that's a company by itself that only does that. So one of the things that we're trying to look at this as is this isn't like a tool or a project. This is when we decided we were going to sort of look into the cave, it was a completely different city and lifestyle and thing that we've ever seen before. Like, I know that our projects are probably single massive companies that would work across all of these things all over the world, and each one of these pieces isn't just a thought or a tool. I mean, this is like an idea or construct that has to change like fundamentally across the entirety of defense. Right? So, you know, looking at any of this stuff, defensive coverage, right? Being able to measure some of those things, being able to measure offensive inputs. Like, how cool would it be if you could get a freaking YAML or JSON or XML blob that said this blob was your entire pen test? The whole thing. Not magic of just like, what did the person do? And you're like, I don't know, I got the shell on this thing. But like every single action that ever happened across the entirety of that whole test, and be able to put that back into the system, to deconstruct it to different TTPs, to reiterate those things, to auto-suggest rules, to try and fix itself, and then get to a point to say, oh, I now backed up against this area where we don't have coverage. That'd be crazy, right? Like, we'd be able to do all of these awesome things. Like, Defender capabilities, if we could take just the ability to run an entire attack chain and then say that attack chain was triaged by these people, and this person took 3 hours to unpack this Java library, and this person took 2 seconds to unpack it and get to the next stage. You can even go back and give a heads-up dashboard to say, these are your defenders, these are the classes that they should be taking, this is the amount of coverage that you have in a human skill set, and if you want to make it faster, hit a button, it'll auto-write the ticket to the person inside of the attack, inside of the classification, that can do it the fastest. That'd be nuts. Yeah. Like, you would flip the whole SIEM world upside down. if we had some of this data.
Yeah.
All right.
There's $1 billion right there.
Yeah, I mean, that's $3 billion companies for anybody who wants to build this shit. Protection capabilities, being able to self-heal. I mean, even being able to auto-scale, right? You can auto-scale your instrumentation and your defense based on the data and telemetry that you're getting back, because that's how telemetry data works in war and everywhere else. If I see that they're expanding at this rate and I can calculate what that rate is, that means I can have an equal or more powerful response. Without data, without measurement of that, we can't see any of it. So what we're asking is help us actually measure what the hell is going on. And if we can all measure what's going on, the amount of things that'll come out of that will be crazy.
Yeah, if I had an ask from this, it would be like, let's start talking about this more and documenting it, figuring out this, like, it doesn't exist, so we can decide whatever we want at this point, right?
Yeah,
So
it's brand new.
that's
We
the
can
great
make it
part.
whatever we want to make it.
We have free reign to say we choose to measure it this way, and until something better comes, that's how we're going to measure it.
Okay. That's about all we have. I know we're a little bit over, but does anybody have any questions or thoughts, or like, man, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, I don't know, any ideas? Any, like, does it suck? Is it okay? Is there anything interesting in it? Thumbs? Yeah?
No?
I'm just saying, it's very interesting. I'm actually in the process of one of my projects is building exactly what you're talking about.
Well, we should chat.
Then we should wrap. Like,
Yeah, totally.
We shouldn't rebuild each other's shit. We should make it faster and better and bigger.
Well, I'm gonna steal a lot of your stuff.
Steal it, bro.
That's
I'm
why
saying
it's
steal it.
why it's getting released and open
Yeah,
source, because I
that's-
want people to build on it.
And you know what? That's why we're doing it at a small conference instead of giant mega RSA conference. Because yeah, sure, we could tell everybody in RSA to do this, and they'll go shit out a bunch of bad product companies all over the place. But like, these are the people who are going to make shit work.
Yeah, I have open DM, so by all means, hit me up. I want to talk. Anybody who is working on this or thinking about this or wants to contribute, hit me up. I want to talk to you, especially if you're doing this already. I want to know how you're doing it.
Because I have places and teams that, like, you know, we're experiencing success, we're experiencing failure, we're trying to fly the airplane as we're building it, and like, it would really, really be helpful for me if you guys could, like, you know, chip in and make my life not suck as much. So, thank you all very much. We appreciate it.